Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in this week, or today, should I say, because I do it twice a week. Today we're going to start a new little topic called Let's Build a Micro Framework. I'm quite a fan of micro frameworks, so I thought it'd be fun to go through the steps of what they are, how we use them, and how they're built. A bit more of an educational stream, I suppose. It's more of a, let's dive in to see how frameworks actually work, and we're going to build on that I find fun. Hey, sorry, I am not even going to try and butcher pronouncing your name there. I'll really struggle. But hi, thanks for tuning in. And hi, Joe. Same as the France versus Germany game. Good thing I have two eyes. Oh, definitely. So I've set out a rough schedule of 3 streams. Hey, thanks, Edgar. Thanks for tuning in. So I've set out a rough schedule of 3 streams. I don't know if we're going to need all 3 or if we're going to need more. We'll see how it goes. But roughly, we're going to start with stream 1. So we're going to cover the following, writing as many tests along the way as we can. We're going to cover, what's a micro framework, what micro frameworks are there, how do we want ours to work. We'll have a look at some dependency injection containers. We'll build out our application class. We'll figure out how we can handle configuration and settings. We'll pull in an application CI, and we'll just kind of recap on all of how all of that is working together, because it's quite a big topic, building a framework. Then the second stream, we're going to move on to routing. So we're going to create a console command to process an open API file to sync the API routes with our application. So basically, just think of that as the API world is kind of going with design first. And the idea here is that we want to go the design first approach, where we're describing our API with an open API specification. That could be a JSON file or a YAML file. And what we want to do, we want our API to kind of reflect that and work with that, and not just be a kind of an extension of it. So what we're going to do, we're going to get an open API file, and we're going to run a console command, and it's just going to process a file, pull out all of the API routes from the API open API file, and we're just going to create references. Basically, we're just going to merge, so anything that's been extended doesn't get overwritten. Then we're going to create a console command to list out the available routes, just because I find it quite useful. We're going to create an emitter dispatcher to handle routes and how we're going to handle the routing aspect. We're going to look into middleware and how we can work with middleware. And then we're going to look at errors and how we're going to handle errors within our API and what standards we could possibly follow. Hey, Has, thanks for coming, mate. Then the last stream, or might not be the last stream, this is as far as I've planned so far. We're going to pick up where we left off, and basically we've got all the basic wiring down to a T now. We've got all the middleware handling, we've got all the route loading, and now we just need to, okay, let's pick a router. Do we want fast route, Symphony, League? Do we want to spin up our own? Maybe we want to add that to our application, and how different ways we could do. Yeah, it's live, Has, always live. Yeah, well, we hope so. Then we look at loading and registering our routes and the different ways that we could do that, considering speed and other aspects. Then we're going to look at creating a request and how we're going to pass that through to the dispatcher on our application, how we're actually going to, that request will come into our application, how we will match it, and how we'll actually respond, and how we'll handle that, and all that good stuff. And then this one is actually now a duplicate, so I should be able to just delete that one. And then we're obviously going to move on, and all of this is going to be testing along the way. So we're going to have a container. We might attempt to build one. We'll see. A router. We might use Symphony here because it's, from what I've seen, it's the fastest performing one, but depends how friendly it is. We're going to have a command bus because I love using command buses. I find them really nice, easy way to kind of be very tight in how you're handling that functionality. We're going to look at a database layer. We could use something like Eloquent or Doctrine, but when it's a tiny micro framework that could be used for a microservice, sometimes something like that is just too much. It's too heavy. So we might look at building a connection manager and building a very minimal database query builder around that. We're going to look at exception handling and how we're going to follow that. What standards are we going to follow? Are we going to follow PSRs, or do we find them too tight for how we want to work with this? Then we're going to look at an events dispatcher. So these are things such as you're looking for something to watch on YouTube and didn't know I was streaming. Well, I talk about it enough. So the event dispatcher, that's going to be things like we might want to perform actions throughout our application lifecycle. You know, the app's booting up, we might want to dispatch an action, might want to log something, so we can start just watching things and just keeping logs of things along the way. And our desired API is pretty much going to be this. It'll be right, okay, so let's boot our app, passing in the base path of where the root of our project is. Then we just want to tell it to run. Everything else is going to be config driven. You know, where your container definitions are kept will be all handled by configuration. Where your roots are going to be handled by are all going to be handled by configuration. There'll be a default standard implied, but those will be overridden if need be. So the workflow is going to be, we will run a console command to process the OpenAPI file. Then the command will merge the registered roots with roots from the OpenAPI file. When the app boots, it basically pulls these roots in and processes them. So, you know, there's no more manually registering roots along the way. It's just, okay, great, let's pull it in and grab it. Container, you know, it's going to mostly pull that from a config file and see how that's going to work. Yeah, so I've just brain dumped some of these. What app am I using? This is Notion. This is what I use to plan all of my streams. So here's all my live streams. Okay, let's build an API. Let's build a Fathom CLI, which is what I'm going to be using sometime soon. I've already started that. I'm just waiting for that API to be available. Then we've got Laravel Basics. And then we're on the let's build a micro framework. I just add them into here, and eventually we kind of go through them. And it's really handy because I can come here and I can say, okay, what do I want? Text page, to-do list, some headings. You can jump down to like media to mention a person, or you know, some inline boards, Kanban style lists, timelines, calendars, images, code snippets. It's really good for just planning stuff, basically. Right. So it might be because I've got a new microphone. I'll try to speak louder just for you, Haz. Let me just go check the audio. Yeah, I think it's just a little bit quiet today because my old headset was it was just really quiet. So yeah, I got a new headset and I got a new keyboard. So let me know if it's a little bit quieter. Right, so let's start. Stream 1. Open this page. So more crisp. That's good. That is good. It might just be my voice. I've got a crispy voice today. There's all those Doritos I've been eating. So I've already created a repo for this. It doesn't have much in it other than your basic setup of static analysis, testing, your basic defaults of git ignore, git attributes, all the GitHub actions, and then obviously tests, which are all going to be driven by PEST PHP. Feel free to come along and have a look at this if you want to. I'm going to drop this in the chat quickly so you can see it. It's been slow today. Okay, I would drop that in the chat, but it's been slow. Ooh, please check my internet connection. Okay, definitely no issues there. I'm hardwired. It is also up on Packagist already, just in case you wanted to pull it in and have a play with it. So our first step is, what is a micro framework? So a micro framework is basically it's a collection of PHP libraries all pulled together to create a framework. And the idea is that it's not it's bare minimum. It's going to get you a HTTP API or a very small kind of request response style application up and running very quickly. It will accept a request, we'll either render a view for you, or we will give you API responses back. That is the point of a micro framework. You don't want a micro framework which has got all the nuts and bolts included. Those are typically extra packages. I've been using micro frameworks now for about almost 10 years. I started with Slim and dabbled around with quite a few others. So what micro frameworks are there? So I've preloaded a few for you. We've got Slim PHP. This is what I started with. It is very good, and it's changed a lot over the years. It's gone from a really simple up and running one package, pull it in and away you go, to more of a kind of this gateway between all the PSRs. And what it allows you to do, you kind of bring your own packages, and you pull in the container you want, you pull in the PSR7 implementation you want, your PSR3 log writer that you might want to use. You can pull in a PSR15 event handler, an event dispatcher if you want to, server request interface, sorry. And it's just a really good way to very quickly get up and running. You go through and you create an app from the app factory, you register a route, and you run. And it's where we got a lot of the inspiration from this. From a couple of weeks ago, I was tweeting about how I missed some of the simplicity of Slim 2, of how it was just you pull it in and away you go. You don't have to do much. And this stream is basically just me moving on from that a little bit more. Then obviously you can't work in PHP without knowing Laravel, and while Laravel might not be a micro framework, Lumen is a stunningly fast micro framework by Laravel. Again, it's kind of like the forgotten one at the moment. Even these haven't been updated for God knows how long. Silex has been depreciated for a couple of years now. Slim 3, wow, it's been Slim 4 for at least a year and a half. So some of these figures might be slightly out of date, and the benchmarking speeds are always, never pay attention to benchmarking speeds. Each framework has its own benefits, has its own best way of running, and you've got to configure it specifically. You can't just take default install and say, right, that is the base, because you've got ways to optimize. It's good. But what I found with Lumen is I find it much easier if I need an API, instead of using Lumen, I'll just go for Laravel and just cut it back to what I need, because then I don't need to turn Lumen into this bigger beast that's not really the purpose of it. And obviously there's Symphony 5. It's the newest version of Symphony currently, and it's component based. And what Symphony 5 allows you to do is pull in all of these different Symphony packages that you might want to use, or use something like Symphony Flex. Allows you to create a very kind of Symphony micro framework instead of a full-on Symphony framework. There used to be what was it called? Silex, but it was no longer maintained, and they suggested Symphony 4. This was a very, very good, again, very similar to Slim PHP. If you look here, very similar approach. It was very good, but with Symphony 4, you didn't need that anymore. So we can move on from Symphony, because most people know about Symphony anyway. And I'm going to make an honorary mention to Chubby PHP, a friend of mine who's from the Slim community, who I've spoken to many a time. He's created this framework called Chubby PHP. I suppose it's a bit of a spin-off of Slim PHP. So it's a minimal, high-performant middleware PSR15 micro framework, which sounds like a mouthful. But basically, hey, Mark, thanks for coming. So basically, the idea of Chubby PHP is that it's like Slim 4, completely PSR compliant, but the way that you work with it is a little bit different. Thanks, wife. It's a very nice headset. And what you do, your application is basically just this kind of this request handler where you pass it in a set of middlewares that you want it to run, and then away it goes. It's very fast, very efficient, and very clean. I don't think this is the only way you've got to do your routing. But the idea is you build up your application by passing in all of these sorts of things. I'm sure there's helper routes after you've booted your application to start adding the routes in a more convenient way for you, maybe. But that is Chubby PHP. It's pretty good. I'll probably take a little bit of inspiration from this because it's extremely well written. And if you come back to the main repository for Chubby PHP organization, you can see that there's actually a PHP Storm request handler. So you can get Laravel Octane style responses coming from Chubby PHP, and it will be pretty cool. But back to why we are here. I've named it PHP Fox because foxes are cool. Yeah, I called my 2-year-old son Sylvester because he was a sly fox. It was a surprise pregnancy, so he's very sly. He had a very cool pram with foxes on it, and it's been a theme ever since. So that's what we're going for. So we've covered that. So let's talk about how we want ours to work. And you'll probably notice I am on PHP Storm today instead of VS Code. VS Code is great, and I love it. But I want to try give PHP Storm another try. It had been really, really slow. I was scratching my head wondering why it was slow. Then I realized I am on a Mac M1 with a silicon chip, and I wasn't running the correct PHP Storm. So it was my own fault. It was slow. So as I said earlier, we want our app to run simply just be booted. We want to boot it, pass in the Basepath, which will be the root directory of your project. Then all your routes are preloaded, your config is preloaded, and all your container definitions are preloaded. And then you can just run. All of those bits are done for you. It obviously will give you the option to add in extra routes, add in extra config and container definitions if you want to, but it's going to push for configuration over anything with this. Yeah, to be honest, I've noticed it's ridiculously fast so far, so I'm actually finding it okay. I'm quite shocked. So, yeah, the Laravel Idea plugin is pretty good, to be honest. Yeah, hi Adrian, thanks for coming. So, what we've got so far, will it allow me to zoom? It won't let me zoom in on that bit. So what I'll do, I will come over to the general appearance, come over to here, and we'll just make everything that much bigger today. There we go. That should be a little bit easier for you to see. If you are struggling to see it, give me a shout in the chat and I'll see if I can zoom it in more. Or if all else fails, I'll go back to VS Code for this part. So our basic setup is we have our .github for all our workflows. Have our issue template. It's got the funding, security, the workflows contributing. We've got our GitHub action already built and working. So this is a very simple one where, when we push on the main branch and when we do a pull request on the main branch, we will run this. Hey, good, thanks. So it runs on the matrix. It's going to fail fast, and we're going to test on Ubuntu latest and Windows latest. Oh, we don't need that. That is something I grabbed from a Laravel package I was building. Just grab the same workflow file, nice and easy. The OS, we have Ubuntu or Windows latest, PHP 8 only. Stability, prefer lowest, prefer stable. We'll probably stick with prefer stable, but we'll see if we start to get any issues. I'd rather keep to stable and not go back a step with having to support, lower versions and keep with the newest API for the PHP language. And then the name for this will be PHP version, stability, and then the OS. So it'll be like P 8.0, preferred stable, Ubuntu latest. Nice way to look at it. It's got some steps where we check out the code. We then set up PHP. Half of these probably won't be needed. We can clean up some of that later on. Set up a problem matcher. This is something I got from Freek van der Herten from Sparsy, actually. You bringing me knickknacks while I'm on stream?
So I don't need them all.
Thanks. Good old wife. And then we're going to install all of our composer dependencies, and we're just going to run our tests, our PEST PHP tests. Do you know if it defaults to Composer v2? I believe so. So if you go to the repo here, I think we're starting to depreciate Composer v1. So a lot of warnings up here now. Yeah, best wife ever award goes to mine. She's brought me snacks, but I can't snack while I'm on stream, so you'll just hear too much crunching. What I'll do when I get into the code part, I'm going to close off my face from the stream so you can focus on the code itself. So back to here. That's all of our GitHub stuff within our tests. Obviously, this comes with PEST itself. This is a part of the PEST init function. So when you come over to here, let me make sure that is zoomed in plenty. GitHub Action. You know what? I'm not 100% sure. So you run vendor bin test, and you can like dash init. And what that'll do, that will create the PHP unit.xml file. It will add these two files in here for the PEST PHP and the example test.php, and it will run through it. We won't start right now because we're on the stream. What it'll do is already exists, skipping that, and skipping that, and then cool. We've installed it, we've initialized it. And what we can then do is, if I come to my composer file quickly, what we've got here is we've got the name, description, type, license, authors. Obviously, more people who join, more get added there. How we're auto loading with PSR4, and there's our namespace, and our development auto load for our tests. Minimum stability of dev, but we're preferring stable so far. All we're requiring is PHP 8. From a development required perspective, it's PEST and SARM. And then we've got our scripts here. So we've got analyze, which is going to run SARM. We've got test, which will run PEST, and test coverage, which will run PEST with a coverage flag. And obviously all of them have descriptions. So if you just run composer, they will show up and give you the option to run those. And then configuration, we're just optimizing the autoloader and sorting our packages. So if we come to our terminal quickly, what we'll do is we will just do a composer run analyze. Run SARM, currently no issues because we've got no code. That's great. So let's run test, example test. Cool. Test coverage. Well, there's nothing going on. There's coverage not found because, oops, it should not happen. If you ever see this, Nunu, I do apologize. I think I just broke PEST on the stream. Oops. Clear that. We'll worry about it later. I'm sure it will still let us test things. So our first step, let's go back to here. So we've looked at how we want ours to work. So dependency injection containers, there are a million of them. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hide my face and focus on this screen now. Bam. So it's a browser. So there's a lot of options. Close all of these down for now. So we could go for, let's go to Packagist. And let's just search for something like PSR container. So here's PSR container, and if you look at dependents, if we wanted to follow that route, we could just pull any of these in. We could go for Symphony, service contracts, dependency injection. We could pull in Laravel's. I think I can already run it, but I've not really played with it much yet. I only installed it this morning. Serializer, we could use Pimple. Illuminate Contracts has got it installed for container. So this is I quite like Illuminate Container, I'm not going to lie. I've never used it outside of the framework though, if I'm completely honest. So it might be interesting to see how it works. There's a league container, which again is pretty good. It's my usual go-to when I'm building just plain PHP stuff, but we'll have a look at that. Zend is obviously depreciated. There is now Laminas Service Manager, I believe. PHP DI is kind of my main go-to. Here we go, Laminas Service Manager. League Tactician, which is a command bus, uses it. Yeah, the PHP DI is kind of one of the popular ones. It's pretty good. We'll look at containers when we actually need one though. So we'll come back to that, I think. So we'll move that down a little bit because we probably won't need that until right at the end. Ooh, layouts. Didn't know I could do that. So first things first, let's build our application class. So we'll come back to these containers and we'll figure that out. If anybody who's watching has got any suggestions, please feel free. I believe there is one called Dice, which is meant to be pretty good. It's meant to be fast. Not 100% sure how up to date it is or when it was last updated 2 months ago on tests. We can have a look at that later if we need to. Illuminate container. We could do, or I believe Jess Archer kind of rebuilt it on stream once or on a talk, and it's pretty good. Oh, thanks. Cheers, Valentine. Thanks for coming along. So, in our README, we can see that we've got an application class in the root domain, and we want a static boot method. That's going to be easy enough. So let's just start this. We're going to create a PHP class called application, and that is it. Yep, okay, don't ask me again. If I'm creating a file, I probably want to add it to version control. So as usual, when I write code, I like to declare strict types to catch re-edge cases. And here is our application, start of the application. So let me zoom in a little bit, make sure this is visible enough. Hey, Ollie. Oliver, sorry, it's not Ollie, it's Oliver. So we will go for a static function boot. And this is going to take one argument of Basepath, which we have to put in, and that will have a return argument soon. So here he is, all better, he's back. So we want a public static boot. We want to kind of follow the private constructor approach because we don't want people to create this class. This class should be kind of booted for them and be kind of pre-set up. So if we come to here, we can, using PHP 8, we can do, actually we can set this private because we're going to make the class final eventually, and we can have Basepath set in there. Basepath, why is it complaining about that? Written but never read. Okay, that's because I've just started. Thank you, PHP Storm. Super useful. So, a really basic approach is we can say, okay, so we're going to return our application back. And within here, we can just do something like return new static Basepath is Basepath. That is enough to get us started. Pure can be added. Oh, that's a new one. Oh, I don't know if I like that. No, we won't. We're not going to worry about attributes this very second. We'll look at it later. So, Nettie. I've heard of Nettie. I can't remember what it's from though. But I believe there's quite a few framework parts to it. So typically, what I'm doing when I'm building something like this, I will come to like my folder here, and I will create a new PHP file. We'll just call this example. What I always do, I just add this to my git ignore. Add example PHP to git ignore. So that what I can do is I can just kind of like play with what I'm building as I build it. So we'll declare some strict types within there. We're going to require vendor auto load. No way, Sam. I didn't ask you to do anything yet. So, can't find file. Cool. So we'll do a quick on those. So current directory. It should be able to find the file. So we'll just run it. We'll run PHP example. It does find it. It's just being slow. So what we can now do, we can say, okay, so our app is going to be application boot, where our path is the current directory that we want to, current directory in this specific instance. Attributes. Yeah, I like attributes, but only if I like need to use them. Simplify that. There we go. We're starting to look how we're expecting. If we go back to let's build. All we need now is like an app run and all the inner workings, right? So we can just do like for now we'll do app run. Obviously that's not going to work. So if we just run that, cool, called an undefined method. So next we can just create that. Click function run. We're going to return anything. And currently it is not going to do anything either. So now our app is where we wanted it to be. But now we need to work on all of the inner little parts to it. So let's come back to here. So if we come to, we want to look at, we've got that. Let's create some classes. So come to tests. We're going to rename this. We're going to refactor, rename. Not example, we're going to call this application test. Ooh. Open that up. Zoom in. If you haven't used PES PHP, it's kind of cool. I kind of like it. I've started using it a lot recently. What I typically do at this point, because this is what I'm classing as a unit test, I would do like a before each. So basically, before each method here, I would then have a closure. Is that, and we'll say this app equals application boot, where the base path is level. Yeah, no, PES is actually really nice. I quite enjoy it. So I need to come up there. This can be simplified. It's going to complain here that we're not in class context, but it works in PES, so it is fine. Ignore some errors. That's what I've learned. So the first step is you can either do an it or a test. I like to use it. So I can it can boot the application, which again takes a closure. And this is where I can start asserting things. I can say, okay, a certain instance of. Let's simplify that one, and we can say that our expected class is our application. And the actual class we are getting is can't run that currently. I don't really want to set up all the configuration on stream, so we'll just do it here. Composer run test. You can boot the application. So as you can see, it's prefixing all of your tests with it, which is very descriptive about that unit. Command and enter. Oh, that's cool. I'm relearning PHP Storm. So what do? We boot it. That will give us our application, and currently we can't really do much. So what we'll probably do, we'll add a quick method here, public function Basepath, which is going to return a string, and we will just return Basepath. I'll shut up some of the errors, and just in case we need it for anything at all. So now we can create another test. We can say it can return the basepath of our object. And a function in there, and then we will assert equals our we are expecting it to be that as we set up here. And what we are actually, another thing I'm trying to get used to with PHP Storm is it's automatically adding things for me. So I can say this app is. So you're saying I can do a command and enter. Nope. Didn't let me, didn't like it. So run my test again. Cool. So we've got our application and we can get the base path back out, which is fine. That's a start. That's our example starter. That's the first part. So when we're booting our application, we kind of want to know if it's booted, and option and space. Ooh, let's try that, shall we? Let's go back. Make sure it's not up there. Ooh, no, that's looking at it. I don't know what that's doing. Ugh. Hey, I'm learning some cool stuff. Okay, so we want to boot our application, but we only really want one available application at a time. So we can do a quick private static application instance. And then within here, what we want to do is, it always complains about this. If static instance is null, then we want to set static instance to be a new static base path there. So all we're doing there is if that is null, or I think This might be better if it's not set, because if it's that shouldn't ever be null at this point. So if the instance hasn't been set yet, then create a new one, and then we're just going to return static instance instead of anything else. A little bit like how the Laravel container works here. So we've done some refactoring. We can still do it. Perfect. And we might want to, we're probably going to want to write a test for this. So what we probably want to do here is do an it can only create one instance. So we'll say instance one is application boot as a base path. That you can have an instance two is application boot as a base path is that. And then we can just do like assert same. So expecting instance one. Actual thing that we get is instance two. We are on PHP Storm. I'm giving it a go. I'm giving it another go just in case. Why that's complaining. Complaining about. Named arguments not allowed. Okay, well it runs. So quiet for a minute, Sam. Cool. So what we're doing there is we're creating two instances and asserting that they're the exact same thing, which is testing whether this little bit of logic here is working. Instance one is created before each test, right? So you only need. Well, I suppose technically I don't need that. I could probably drop that, turn that to 1, and turn this to this app. This should still work. Yeah, good shout. Good shout, Thinkiverse. So because before each test is ran, or for each method is ran, we're already booting it up. There's no point booting it up again, just assert it. So good shout. I like that. And we could probably even clean that up even more just by doing that. Do it all in line. Think of the memory. Think of the memory. There we go. That's that part. Just joined. Mind giving an update? Yeah, sure. So all we've done so far is we've discussed what a micro framework actually is, explained why we use them and when we use them. And it's mainly for the small kind of API style applications where you want, quick request response, nothing like a huge, a good big Laravel application where you want events dispatching, where you want to broadcast over WebSockets, where you want a huge CLI that can run a schedule and all of that sort of stuff. And then we went over what micro frameworks there are. We talked about Slim PHP, Lumen, Symphony 5. We spoke about Silex, even though that's been depreciated. We spoke about Chubby PHP, which is PSR compliant up to the hilt framework, which is pretty cool and quite fun to work with. And then we started building our application class. And that is where we are now. And all we're doing it kind of test driven as we go. And what we'll do is I always come back at the end and add comments just in case things change along the way. So Basepath, constructor, we've got all of these. That is all done. So all we're doing is we're booting our application. We can only boot it once because we store it in the static instance there. So if we try and boot it again, we're just returning that same instance. So that we're always pre-configured and pre-built, ready to go. So the other thing we want to do on this is I want to have a private Boolean booted. Is by default set to false. So what's that going to do? We haven't booted yet. At this point, we are booting. So this is where we need to do something very slightly different. Where we could do something like app equals static instance. Let's then return app. And then within here, this is where we can do our setup. So we just run our tests, make sure that still works. That does. Now we can say app booted through. We can now say it's booted. And what we do before that is this is where we load things. By default, it's not going to boot until we've created the instance or got the instance, or if there is an instance. Then we're going to load all the things. I like that. Load all of the things. And then we're going to say that the app is booted, so it means it's ready to go, and just return the app. So obviously that's just going to work because we've not changed much. We could add a method in here. We could just say something like is booted or something like that. Public function is booted. We're just going to return a Boolean value on whether it's been booted. Return this booted. And that should always be true, obviously, because we've got our app. So we'll just make sure of that. We can say it will always be booted once the boot method is ran. There's no other way to create it, so we can almost guarantee it's always going to be there. So at this point, we can do an assert true, and we'll use our little handy keyboard shortcut. I believe that takes a condition. Yes, it does. And we can say this app is booted. Can't use that. We need to do that. So let's make sure it's always booted. Yep. It will always be booted once the boot method is ran. So at this point, we can start looking at our next step. We've got our basic application. We've written tests. At this point, we can do a composer test coverage and see how we're looking. 90.9. Apparently, we haven't tested line 46 yet. Let's have a look at line 46. Okay, we're not actually doing anything with that yet, so that's fine. I'm not too worried about that. So we can make that even easier. So there we go. So next step is come back to here, configuration and settings. So in our application, we're going to want to do certain things. And I'm imagining how the file structure will want to be built. And I'm very used to, you can always type return booted and PHP Storm will add this. But it's kind of cool. I'm learning more about PHP Storm every time I use it and every time I talk to someone. So we're going to create a new directory. We're just going to call this config. And we will again add that to the git ignore because this is all just part of while we're building. So that's config. We don't want to load config. So for now, we're just going to create like a app. And this will, much like Laravel, return that. And we're just going to say that the name is PHP Fox. And we'll do something like a version 1. Very clean, very simple. So zoom in on that one. So we're just doing basic configuration within here now. So we're expecting at this point for it to be loaded. So if we come to our application, that's where we're starting to load all the things in here. So this is where we'll do something like this load config. And what we kind of want is a nice way to do it. So a nice way to do it. That's going to be hard. And also that needs to be app load config. So that is now done. We can add a new method down here called public function load config. I always start with public functions and decrease if I need to. This doesn't need to return anything. So there is that. There's our config, how we're going to load it. So we're going to have a base path passed in by default. So what we need to do, we kind of need to look within that base path. So the easiest way for us to do that is say, okay, so let's collect our files. We'll do like a scander, and we'll say our directory is this base path, and that will give us // so we should just be able to say config like that. And what would be really nice while I'm building this actually is there a way I can just add they to any PHP project, not Laravel, just PHP in general. Got that, install framework agnostic PHP. I can just use that. So now I can, here's a require. We want this as a dev dependency. Done. Perfect. Just be Ray up in the background. And here's Ray. You should be able to see that nicely. So what we want to do at this point is we just kind of want to say, okay, Ray files, and we'll just run that example file because we know that's going to call it. So at this point, we've got an array. We've got an array of potential files we can use. Let me make that bigger. Here we go. So as usual, if you're in Linux or a Unix style operating system, you will always get these. But luckily, we can do a very quick kind of is-dir on it. So let's go. That is now an array. Scan-dir here will return an array of file names on success or false on failure. So we can do a quick sort of if no files, let's throw a new exception, and we'll call this config loader exception. What we'll do is we'll probably just create that class in a moment, and the message for that will be could not load config files from this path config. Please ensure they exist. Something, quite descriptive. We'll probably call that config loading exception because we want to kind of describe what we're doing a little bit. Glob. I'm not sure if there's any speed difference between glob and scander. Definitely interested to look at it though. So what we'll do, we'll create a new directory and we'll follow the Laravel convention, and we'll just create a support directory within there. And within support, I will add an exceptions because it's not to be huge. We don't need the level of different support options available as Laravel does. So we can create a new PHP class, and this one's going to extend exception, and done. And as usual, we'll declare stick types, extends exception, so we can simplify that. Unused element, no, that's fine. So now we can just import that class too. So it's going to complain because it's going to unhandled exception, but glob ignores the dots. Still no snippet. I know, I've only just started with PHP Storm today though, so I'm waiting to see. Right, so if there's no files, we'll do that. Our next step. What we'll do is we'll do something like for each files as file. What I'll do, I'll probably refactor parts of this later. I'll get it working, come back to it and see how we get on. So if it is not a directory, and this will be the file, what we'll do is we'll grab the info about the file and we'll just do like a standard path info. And we're just going to pass in file at that point. So that we should be able to just say kind of rate on the info there, which will give us the information we want. So what I'll do to make this part easier, I'll open up the terminal, ray up the top, this down the bottom, and I'll zoom into here. So I will go to GitHub, Fox framework, and we'll just run a PHP example. That, I believe, if we click, there's a way to clear this. Ray, we'll just have a look, see what happens. Bam. So we've got the dir name, base name, extension, and file name. So what we can do, we can just get the file name at this point. The best thing I can think to do right now is just kind of like require it. So we could just do something like create a config array up there. For now, this is something that we'll probably improve upon. And what we'll do is we'll say info file name, and that's going to equal require. See if this will this Basepath config file. Let's just dump out config there. Cool. So now we've got everything. We've got app. It's all keyed, just like we would do if it was Laravel. And I've actually got a package which I use for config. It's one that I built, which I like to use because it works the way I need it to. As always, directory star.php. Have a look at that. I'll finish this little part and then we'll look at actually. No, we won't. I will have a look. I'll have a look now for you. So basically, we're still going to want that, but this files might change. So we'll just comment that out for now. We'll say files equals. You're saying that I can do a glob, pattern, string, and flags. Cool. So what we want is this Basepath, followed by config, and then anything .php. At this point, I can just lay out files and see what it gives me. If it gives me the same output, it gives me a file. That's kind of cool. So I can now do that. So we'll drop that. We'll drop the scander. We'll use glob. It's like glob brace or something that you can pass in or something. I've used it once before, just not that often. And for each files, we'll go through config and just lay out the config there. Cool. Fire. Ooh. Something's complaining. Application line 54. 54. Okay, so we're just going to ignore that. And we're just going to lay out info right now, just in case something's wrong. Okay, dir name, base name, extension, file name. Yeah, it kind of is, Marion. It's good. It's very powerful, but I find it quite slow. I have a full path, I suppose. So if I just kind of lay out require file. Shouldn't have to do any sort of magic at this point, really, should I? Will give me that part, but it's not going to give me like the name, so I still need the file name. So that is, I still need this part. So it just means that this I can require file instead of all of it, in theory. So now, can I? How do I clear a? That do. What are some of these? Oh, no, don't want to do that. Ooh, I really need to get used to working with Ray, don't I? So now I've got that. I can drop that is dir check. I have done. Already dropped. Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Sorry. But it's dir. Perfect. Pair programming with however many people are watching. So we get the info, then we can just require that in. Quite okay, it's not analyzed, that's fine. Rate info, we don't really want that. That should give us all of that, and then we can just, at the end of it all, lay out the config. Ooh. Oh, I can add an extra screen. Command Shift K. Example. We've got app, name, and version. Perfect. So if I add another config file within here, we could do something like routing or something, routes or routing.php, and within here we'll just do something very basic like just add a test in there. I remember that some of these keyboard shortcuts. So now we got config app, config routing. And what we can do now, we can close that down because we don't actually need that or that. We can still keep that exception in there just in case there's nothing returned. We need to make sure people are returning, adding some level of config. That's all the config. So package time. Composer require me/config. And what this is, it's a nice simple little config package. So what we'll do up here, we'll set a private repository. It's based off of a Laravel one, and we'll just call this config. Code config. Unhandled. Okay. We won't worry about that right now. We're not going to try and catch it because we're just throwing it. So now we've got config down here. We can say something really simple like this. This new keyboard is also taking a while to get used to. I've changed everything this last week. So config repository, and we're going to build. And the items we're going to pass through is config. So now if we run that again, nothing's coming out, which is great. So if that's all of our config, we can also add like a helper function in here now also to say, add all these helper functions at the end here. Like a public function config, we're going to return a repository. So we'll just return config. So now in here, should just be able to quickly do like array app config. Run it. You get a repository with some items in it. So we should be able to say config get where the key is app. That should just give us everything from app. And we can then specify with dot notation app name. Done. Nice and clean way to do config based off of how Laravel does theirs. So we can drop that now. That's our configuration loading. Now we need to test around this. So how are we going to test this? We need to test that our config is loading and that we can, hey, Daniel, thanks for joining, mate. So let's add one here. We will do a it can load our initial configuration. So there's a few things we can test with this one. We can do like a certain instance of, and we can say that we are expecting our repository class. We'll just pull that. Ooh. Simplify that one. And then we will say that the actual class we're getting back is this app config. That is going to start us off. Ooh, not PHP example. So let's just clear our input and we'll do a composer run test. Oh, it's getting our initial class back. See how your student's doing. Go back to chewing your crayons, Daniel. So there's our initial test. All we're doing here is saying, okay, so we're always going to boot our repository, our application in every test. So we know we've got the pre-booted application, and we know it is reading from the correct directory here. So in theory, we should be able to start asserting values that we've got stored locally. So we can say assert equals, and we know that we've stored the name as Fox, and the actual result we're getting back is this app config get. The key we want to get is app.name. So that, in theory, should pass. Great. So what we can also do at runtime is we can also set things. But that is all part of the config itself. So we don't really need to write tests for this. Here's our repository, there's our constructor. If we come over to the project quickly and go down to vendor, go down to, wow, that's a lot of things in there. So just Steve King, config, tests. We've got tests already. So we don't need to write tests for any of this code here. It is already tested. So there's no point repeating ourselves. Go back to shapes and colors down. That's not very nice. Why no dark UI? I actually had dark UI on earlier today, but that's only because I had a migraine. I use light now because it's actually clean and it's quite nice. And on a stream, it makes it a lot easier to see some of the code as well. So what we'll do next is we'll see how good our coverage is right now. So cool, that's fine. So 44 to 45 and 80 is where we haven't written any tests. So that is loading our config. So we could do a fake, create a new, yeah, we'll do that. We're going to expect that exception at this point. So we'll call it a day with that test. And we can say it will throw an exception if no config files are found. So this is how you handle exceptions in pest tests. You can say throws, when you spell it correctly, it throws. You can say the exception class is going to be config loading exception. So what that's going to say is to you who might be using this framework is a config loading. Oh, it's having issues loading my config. Kind of makes sense. So we'll do an app application boot, and the base path this time we're just going to say the current directory we're in because we know we don't have config there. This should automatically throw that exception. If I'm thinking correctly. Failed asserting is thrown. Okay, so let's just lay out our app. Oh, that's because we're looking for anything with a PHP file. Okay, so we'll go back and we'll go to like GitHub maybe. Current directory, back a level and into GitHub. Because we're still finding PHP files. Failed asserting that the config loading exception is thrown. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to delete that and we'll just see what is going on. So booted Basepath config repository. We've got a repository And it is loading everything in like it should be. So again, we've only got the one coming through. Booted repository. That's because we're still doing the before each. Okay. Okie dokie 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 dokie. What can we do here? Yeah, TD's great, but it can slow down a lot. Turbo E, and what we'll do is we'll just ray E. If we're getting an exception that we just weren't catching and it's just dying in the background, we're going to clear that view and we'll just do it here. Composer run test. Test did not perform any assertions. No, but you should still have done something with my code. Try app. Run it again. I'm not doing anything. So what we'll do is here. I'll put the files there instead of in the test and just see if there's something going on that we're just not seeing. Lots of files, routing. Cool, so that bit's working fine. We will just array out here. The files. Debugging. Don't you just love debugging? And the test. Okay, that's not even going. So what I'll do, we're not hitting that. So it returns an array or an empty. Okay, so if we're probably going to have to do like a if empty there or something. Now let's see if that'll work. Well, what did I do? Slipped, that's what I did. None of that. Turn all of that. We don't want any of that going on. Let's just do that. Let's just see what happens. Setting empty. Okay, so we've got this. Still getting that from before, but that is it. Is it the same instance? No, we're getting a new instance. What I'll do, I'll probably come back to this test there because, yeah, I did add it back. I'll probably come back to this because it's taken longer than what I want. I'll come back to it. It should only be looking for PHP files. What we'd do at this point was do something like instead of doing that, we'll see if we're actually reaching that point. We are reaching that point, but that's before. So now we can do something like a test app. Test. So between there should be what we're looking for. This. So we're getting it. Oh, it's the same instance. That's why it's not allowing us to create a new instance. Oh, I've obviously had a day. So I won't worry about that right now. We'll worry about that test later. Currently we're not using that, so I can just delete that. So that is our config. We're getting all of this. Let's make sure we haven't got any ray hidden in here. And that, nothing's appearing. Right, so that's our config. This part we'll test later. We should be able to get all of that. That should be in there. Cool, that is our configuration loading. So handling configuration and settings. Next, we'll look at the CLI. Why we use? Oh, ignore what I was doing there. I was chasing a rabbit down a hole because it's been a long day. So ignore that last part. CLI. We want a CLI for our application because ideally what we're going to want to have here is, if we come to the README, I can jot some of this down. What we're going to want is there's a desired API. We're going to want a way to integrate with it from the console. We're going to want to be able to say something like PHP Fox root process or root sync, something like that. Just something simple. And what this will do at that point is, process an open API specification and just sync it with your application. That is going to be the idea. And we could pull in something like Symphony console application, but that's massive. The idea is it's going to be a small, relatively simple application. So let's just get started with Mini CLI, which is a really, really cool little CLI with zero other dependencies other than ext readline. So creating a simple one, we're just going to require mini CLI. And we've got it. We've got our CLI available. So next, let's just close our application down and close all of these down a second. Our next step is to create an executable PHP script with the following content. So we'll just grab that and we'll amend as we need to. So within our root here, this won't be committed. This will be in this is like the Laravel /framework repository, and there'll be like a Laravel /Laravel style where it's like a pre-built app ready to go. So we're going to create a PHP file and we are going to call this box within there. And we want it to call PHP. We want to refactor, rename box. So here it is there, app signature, blah, blah, blah. Let's just see how this works. Can we run it yet? PHP Fox. We have it. Here is our signature. So our signature is going to be Fox. Right, nice and simple. That didn't take any effort at all. So what else? What can we add to this now? So it will set up a command called my command to execute it. First, make it executable. Yep, cool. And then you can run my command. So I should be able to do my command. Perfect. Lots of cool stuff. So creating a structured app using the application template. So we're going to want a command directory somewhere, and that's going to do stuff. Command namespace, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Namespace and controllers. Let's have a look at that. Okay. I can make I don't want it to be called app. So let's go have a look at how this is loading. The name, input. Okay, I can add them in line. And I'm assuming that's just a callable. So if I look at register command, that is a callable. So I should be able to just give it an invocable class. So we'll have a look at that. So let's create a test one within source. We'll create a directory called console. Another directory called commands. And we're just going to create like a test or something like that. Or something. Okay, darling. So we'll just create a new PHP class, and we're just going to call this test command. Doesn't need to extend anything. That is the first part. Default controller. We're going to extend the command controller and see how that works. Let's just pull that in. Let's zoom in a bit. First time using this, so let's see how well it goes. We got that, and then all we need is a handle method, implement a handle method. So they're just saying this get printed display something. So we're just going to do that. We just do content and so now if I come over to here and just do PHP Fox, not doing anything yet. Do I need to register commands anywhere? Register command. Let's have a look at app. Let's see what app will give us. Services, config, get, add service, load, get printer, app handler, signature, set themes, register a command, name callable, register a command. Can I just like pass it the class? We don't really want to do anything there. This is quite an interesting one. It's obviously still quite new. Let's go have a look at the getting started again. Creating a simple app. Application template. My app. Then we have command help, default controller, test controller. Does it have? How does it handle that? And caught command not found. Okay. We'll do like test command call. We'll do something like do test command handle. Complain. Void method handle. Oops. Okay. Something callable. Is it going to complain? Yeah, maybe. We'll see. Maybe. That's what I was trying to look at in their documentation. It obviously something we need to look at. Because if you look at the class itself, it's not clear. I'll look at their app. There's no array config app path. Ooh, I could do app path. Good shout. Good shout. We'll do config array. I'm going to pass through app path, and that is going to be current directory. Source console commands. Let's just do that. Expected throw in app line 194. Have I like changed some? Oh, Try not to do that again. Okay. Command test not found. Can I do like a command? A naming convention? We will refactor and just rename this to test. Do that refactor. Try again. No. So console commands test. Okay, so it needs a controller. So I need a namespace for test. So we'll create a test here. Then we are going to refactor this and we're going to move this file. Refactor. And we're going to rename this to default controller. Yep. Do it. Cool. Now, let's see. Okay, console does not comply with naming conventions. Okay, so PHP Fox console commands. Yes. This should fix it. Yeah, I just noticed that. Hey, we got there. We got it. We got the test command. So now we can actually, we don't need to worry about registering commands manually anymore. We're doing the signature there, at run command. We can do so if we do a PHP Fox. Oh, hasn't got anything. So we'll have a look at what we can do. We don't need that command call in there anymore. Passing through the app path. Any other config options? We could probably pass through the theme and debug as false. What happens if we say debug false? Debug false. Ooh, what's going on with that? Command help not found. Perfect. That's what I wanted. And you can do lots of cool themes, but I'm not going to worry about theming. I think that's probably going a little bit too into it for a stream right now. So that's our CLI. We can start creating commands. Great. We've got a CLI. We haven't got any commands that are very useful right now. So for now, we could just do something like content is hello from the test command. Something simple. Hello from the test command. Just standard output. So that is all of that, and that is how we want that to work. So next, back to the container. We can now look at the container again. Or let's go back to how it works first. Have a quick sip of my drink. So we'll go back to example PHP. What we've got is an application class which has a static boot method. It can't be constructed, and it just boots everything up for you by passing in that base path. It will load everything through kind of the default values where it's expecting things. We may pass an extra option through here later on for like changing some of the defaults, but we'll get round to that once we need it. And then we would just run the app. Currently run does absolutely nothing. It's currently returning void and is doing nothing. So our application itself, we have a static instance available, so we can only ever boot the app once. We always get the same one back. If it's not set, we'll just set the static instance to a new static, passing in the base path being provided. And then we start loading all the things because we've now got a static instance. If that isn't, if it is already set, we'll just set app to the current instance which is available. We will then load our configuration. Unhandled, not bothered. And then we will set our application to true and return our app to allow us to run it later on. So when we're loading config, we are using glob and we're saying, okay, so get everything from the base path config star.php, get all of those files. If we don't have any files, we're going to throw a config loading exception and say that we can actually load anything. So make sure there are some files. Then we're going to start with an empty array for config. And then we're going to loop over each file that we got through, just push all of that back up into that config array. And then we're just going to build a repository to allow us to use dot notation for our config. So all clean, all relatively simple. We've got a couple of helpers. We've got Basepath, we've got config, we've got is booted, all standard helper little helper functions. None of them doing much, just quick access. And so far, all but the constructor should be public, because we'll come back through later on and we'll set private or protected to whatever's relevant. Do we need access to the base path? No. Okay, we'll set that to something else and we'll just work with it that way. So how long have I been streaming for? An hour and 36 minutes. Where are we? How does it work? DI containers. It looks like I timed it pretty well. So the DI container, we could use something like the Illuminate container, but I am not 100% sure if that's going to give us any speed issues, because it is quite big. It's a read-only split, and all it's doing is you can create an instance much like we can with our app. You can start resolving things. It's a pretty good container. Nettie DI. Adrian recommends Nettie DI. Okay, so let's Density injection. Flexible, compiled, and full-featured with perfectly usable auto-wiring and support for all new PHP features. Okay, not too many extra requirements. Last updated relatively recently. This is how I typically look at packages. Only 8 issues, 90 closed. Some of them are getting quite old. When was the last one closed? One closed this year. Not bad. Not bad at all. So the next step is to look at how to use it and how it looks. Class mail interface. All of this stuff. Here's our container. Hey Craig, thanks for coming, mate. Container create newsletter. Nettie container loader, pulling from that. Class distribute, get by type, services. I don't know whether that's going to be too much config for me right now. I don't know whether we should start with something simple. It's not PSR compliant, not the end of the world, but it'd be useful to have a PSR compliant one so it can be overwritten. I'll say no to the Nettie one just for now. Illuminate container is pretty good. Do we want? We kind of want similar behavior. We'll have a look. We'll have a look at the Illuminate one because I'm very used to Laravel. I may as well have a look and see how it looks. That's my main worry. Is the Illuminate one going to be too bloated? I mean, if you look at this part, it's not actually that big. You know, it's one main file with, you know, yeah, okay, 1,400 lines of code, but it covers a lot. It's got contextual bindings, got utilities which are used inside container. Doesn't really have any documentation, but we shouldn't technically need it. Oh, that sounds like a very, very long evening there, Craig. So you're watching while you're waiting for your terrapin to give birth in the garden. Oh, Nettie's too bloated. No, I think it's just all the, you know, YAML config here, there, and everywhere. You know, this isn't DevOps. We like to config with arrays if possible. I mean, we could, let's come back to here and let's look for Jess Archer. Here we go. Jess Archer did a really good talk. Open it up on YouTube and we'll just pause that one quickly. The Brisbane Laravel meetup, and it's all about building a service container from scratch. And the way she's done it is pretty good. It kind of works for what we need, I think. It's a simplified version of Laravel's, and we want something similar. But because it's not a package, we can't really do much. We can't like pull it in. Symphony's dependency injection. I've heard that that's not so amazing. How good? How is it? So dependency injection, container builder, register. So you can register things. Register. You can add arguments. Add argument. We want something a little bit more simple. Register, register, container builder. YAML file loader. Ooh, yeah, we're starting to get into the YAML territory again. I'm probably just going, yeah, Jess is fantastic. If you haven't seen the talk, watch that talk. She deep dives how and why this has been built this way. I think maybe this is going to be our best approach right now. I've had a look at it before when I was looking for options, and you know, it's 130 lines. It's kind of for fun, kind of just for to play with, and I'm going to build an API with it later down the line. So I'm probably going to stick to something like this. So what we'll do is we'll copy that one, and what we'll do, we'll just create a container within here. We'll create a container class. Obviously, props to Jess Archer on this one because this part isn't actually going to be my code. So we're going to have a static instance, much like we do on our app. We're going to have some bindings, some instances, again, a private constructor, a static get instance, a very similar pattern. Then we're going to bind into a container. Yeah, it's Symfony's DIs. It's fine if you're using Symfony, but if you're not using Symfony, it feels like a little bit. You're throwing YAML into a knife fight at that point, right? So we're gonna have to include the binding exception, resolve dependencies. We will just grab all of this and we'll go through it in our editor, and we'll just see what we need to do with it to make it work for us. Definitely add a note in here about thank you for your example code, Jess. Drop that in there for now. So we can simplify that one. Haven't got that one yet. Reflection, simpler version of what Laravel does, blah, blah, blah. New instance, getting some stuff, doing some stuff. Reflection, again, simplify. I prefer to put them in that way. Let's put that in that one. Instances, abstracts, going through stuff, doing some more stuff. Anything that I need to worry about yet? Because this works so similar to Laravel, you know, I don't need to worry too much. So this is a container instance. That's the only thing. Change, sorry, typo, I think. Yeah, container. So yeah, it engineered to be a bit more enterprise, kind of, yeah. Also, it came at a time when it was perhaps needed. I find when I'm doing anything with Symphony, I feel like I'm doing it the long way around all the time. So I kind of get a little bit frustrated. So here is all of those there. So the only other thing, we're going to have some issues within here and there. So what we need to do is this binding resolution exception. So all we need in support exceptions is create a new class again, and that is going to extend exception. All we need to do there is simplify that, clean up our file a little bit. This technically isn't needed, but it's a habit I'm in. So now I can import that class. I'm going to do keyboard problems. So now I can drop that, and that should be our container ready to go, to be honest. Again, no tests on this. Test, then if we just do a test coverage, yep, we've got 0 tests over here. That bit, I don't know how we're meant to test that right now. That is most likely to be removed from this and be implemented elsewhere. This is more for other stuff. So we've got no tests on the container. Luckily, Jess has us covered. She went to look for strict type. Yeah, that's how you identify it as mine at the moment. It's got strict types everywhere. So Jess actually wrote a lot of tests, which is great. Might not have been 100% test coverage, but it's better than nothing. So what we'll do is we will grab this bottom part, and we're just going to check that off. Say thank you, Jess. That was super useful. Saving me a lot of time building my own version of Laravel's when you've already done it on stream. Now we're going to create a new PHP file, and we're just going to call this one container test. And again, we can do a types within here, then before each is a closure. Is that, and then we can just do something like this container equals container get instance, and let's just try that. So now we've got our before each, that's all set up. I don't think this is going to make any difference if I set what variable it is there, so I'm not going to bother. Let's close that down, and now we can start writing the tests. So we need all of those in the bottom. So right at the bottom, we're just going to drop those classes in that Jess created. And we're just going to do something very similar to her tests. We're just going to pull her tests in because we pulled her stuff in, and don't normally see declarations in every class unless it's Steve. It's definitely a Steve thing. So let's scroll to the top. How many? We've got quite a few. Problem with new. Do I want to do expect exception message? No. See you later, Ollie. Thanks for coming. So again, like what we did with our app, we can grab that and we can say, it must be a singleton. So it must be a singleton. This part of the stream is all about how to convert normal tests to pest, maybe. We'll call it that. So then we can do like an assert same. We can just import function, and we can say that that is expected. And that's what we're actually getting. So now we can. Something failed. Static property instance must not be accessed before instantiation. Ooh, ouch. Okay. Ow, fair doing is null. Okay, so not is set. There we go. That now passes. Open your settings, templates, add strict types. I'm not adding too many more today, but I'll definitely do that for next time. So container test, we don't need an app or container right now. We're just going to close everything but this. So it must be a singleton. We're not going to assert any exceptions right now. We'll come back to exception handling stuff. So we can provide instructions for resolving a class. Cool. We're going to do something similar. I just realized we're doing containers there, so we don't need that before each. So here we go. It can be provided a set of instructions for resolving a class. Pop in that, and then we can do like a assert that container make. Tell you what, I won't worry about adding all of the named arguments because that's just going to slow all of it down. For now, I will just get it across and we'll look at named arguments further down the line. So now that coverage, we're getting closer. We're now on 36 and we were on 9.1. So it can provide a set of instructions. We can also use a string for a key. Perfect. Let's do that also. Yeah, using pest. It's I'm really enjoying how clean it is when writing tests, and I can be really kind of descriptive in how I'm writing it. So it can also use a string for a key. It can also use a string for a key. At this point, we can just kind of function, put that in there, container, and we can just drop this part and just say set instance we've already got. All of that's already in. So now we can run it again. Still 36.4. We're not really doing anything extra with that test, but it's okay. We'll copy her note as well. Gonna have to drop her a tweet later. So we can also bind to an interface, basically. So what we'll do on this one, it can also bind to an interface. Let's drop that code snippet. Oof. I don't know what I did there. Typing too quick for my brain to know what I'm doing. So again, asserting an instance of, expecting that. Are we going to go higher than 36.4? Nope, still testing the same sort of stuff, but that's fine because we're testing different versions of it. Now we're testing, we can pass a concrete class as a second parameter. So something like it can accept a concrete as a second parameter. Drop that in there. We don't need that part there. Let's make sure this is still all going good. We're now up to 50%. Higher order stuff they just released is so good. Yeah, I've not looked at it yet. It's something that's on my list of things I definitely need to look at. So we can also make classes we've never seen, 0 config resolution. Cool. So basically what that means is we haven't added it to the container, but we can still create it. So it can make a class we have yet to see. So config resolution. Function in here. Ooh. Still getting used to this keyboard. It's slightly smaller than my old one, but I think it's quieter. You have to let me know if you think it's quieter, anyone who's watched one of my streams before. It feels quieter to me. So we can recursively resolve. This should bump that up. This should bump up that test coverage. It can recursively resolve dependencies. Making sure I spelled that all right. So drop that in there, and we only want to assert this once here. Cool. So we were on 50. We are still on 50. We can also bind a singleton. So let's just drop that in next. And also bind a singleton. Eventually, I'll probably start refactoring parts of the container. But this is going to be a perfect starting point for how we want it to work. The keyboard's better good. I'm still considering whether I need to get quieter switches because I went for the blue switches, but we shall see. 59.1, that bumped us up a little bit. And then we're going to go for it binds a singleton by passing the instance. So it binds a singleton by passing the instance. I have to PR that fix, but I don't think she'll be too bothered about that really. Container instance, blah, 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 doing stuff, nice and magic, done. B, so it binds a singleton by class name only. Ooh, some fancy tests. This is pretty well tested as well, to be honest. If you're looking at just test coverage in general for a container, she's definitely covered a lot of good stuff in here. Definitely have to make a note on this in the README. So we are binds a singleton by class name only. Binds a singleton by class name only. If you've never actually seen any of Jess's videos or talks or anything, I'd definitely suggest looking at them. She is absolutely fantastic. Whether it's Laravel or Vue, she just knows so much. It makes you kind of stop in awe sometimes. 63.6, cool. We're still doing good. It does dependency injection, kind of the important thing, right? So as injection. So let's just drop this in here. We're going to set instance of that stuff. Okay. Straight up to 84.1. And that's it. That's all of the tests. That's all we need. So what I'm going to do before we do anything is grab that link, come over to our README. I'm just going to say container implementation from sample repo by S. Archer. What we'll do is we will turn that into a, how do we do links? I always forget links. It's square bracket followed by circle, example repo. Let's go look at the preview now. Yes, I got it right first time. That is so rare. And we're going to go to Jess's link here, and we're going to make sure she gets her link in there too. There's Jess. Payment implementation from Jess Archer. This will be refactored and extended later, but provides us a great base. Perfect. So yeah, she's been working with the Laravel Shift platform recently, from what I've been following. All I'm going to say is it's going to be really cool to see what's coming from Laravel Shift when those two have teamed together. So there's our container. So basically, we're going to close parts of this. Close that down. That's our DI container. Next stream is going to be processing an open API file, creating a console command, emitting, dispatching, handling routes, middleware, and errors. So all we've done this stream really is a lot of setup. We've done a lot of setup to get us where we're going to want to be, basically. This Fox thing we'll keep in there. Shift is actually really good. We don't need that. We're just going to delete the console for now because we don't need it. Fox. Yeah, so that's where we got to so far. Let's just delete that. I hate that it gets cached now. Just delete it anyway. So now for the scary part. This is a part that everybody hates. Oh, only 2 errors. That's actually not bad. Okay, so one's on the container and one is on the application in the exact same part. Static property PHP Fox instance with type has unexpected iset check. Should it be nullable? No. Not really. I don't think it gives us many options. This is set. Yeah. I'm not too bothered about that. So that's 2 static analysis issues I can live with. I'm happy with it as it is. I'm not going to add nullable attributes, potentially nullable attributes, just because when it's about how it's being booted, not the fact that it could potentially be null before calling. Yeah, that is here's our example app run. And what we'll do is in our git ignore, we're gonna get those two. We're gonna allow them to be in the repo. The example is just going to be a good explanation of how it works. And then obviously the config will be very useful for the tests on GitHub anyway. So I'm just going to do a git add. I'm going to do a git commit. YouTube stream. Let's build a micro framework. Episode 1. Much easier than describing absolutely everything. It's not going to production, it is just to play with and for education and something to play with on streams. So that's now all been pushed up. We can close those and let's go check our repo. Just got it come through. We've got our GitHub action running. Yeah, there's no. Yeah. Sometimes it's just a no. So where have we got to? Let's adding that in there. That one. We'll add those next time. Desired API installation. Following the instructions. This is going to be this part here. So this is, if I go to this part, it's you should use one of the framework templates instead of installing this package. However, if you want to create your own template, please follow these instructions. So basically, much like Laravel/Laravel, you don't usually pull in Laravel/framework because you tend to use Laravel/Laravel instead, which is a template of how to work with the framework. So that's all we've done here. And then we've got container implementation from example repo by Jess Archer. Noted down the bottom. That is good. Then next stream. All tests are passing. Just what we wanted. Means we didn't break anything. So next time, let's just do something here. I like them, but they're a bit of a pain. What we also want is we can't really insert one before, which is a bit annoying. Say nope, and we're just going to say want to be able to pass a YAML file for our open API spec. And then we're also going to potentially pass a JSON file for our open API spec. And we're going to want to create a parsing class which will detect the type and automatically pass. So that is all about parsing with JSON or the YAML, most likely YAML for me for when it comes to Open API, because it's declarative and I like it. And then, yeah, if it's to do with system design, container design, API design, YAML's great. If it's to do with like payloads, it's JSON. If it's config, it's an array. So then we're going to create a parsing class which will detect the type and automatically pass. Then we're going to want to create a class which will generate routes from an open API file, and then we will want to console commands to process and sync them basically. So this step will just will be the implementation of that step. Then we're going to be able to create a list of all of the available routes. And then we're going to want to find a router. And we're going to it will find it's a dispatcher really. dispatcher to handle routes usually comes with a router, but just in case, then we're going to want application middleware, and we're also going to want how we're going to handle root middleware, because that's also important. And then we're going to look at handling errors globally also. So yeah, how do we want to do that from an API perspective? Okay, I'm going to do that now. So I'm not teasing you anymore. So I can go to my settings, file and code templates. File and code templates. And if we go to a PHP class, what we can do is up here, being sad, add that in there. It'll also stop me being sad in the long run. Cool. Apply, okay, done. Right, at that, I am going to call it a night. I've done quite a bit. I believe that is everything pushed up to Git. README. And I will catch you on Twitter, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks very much.